Ooh, breaking out of habits. Well, that's kind of the whole game, right? And this is kind of relating to what I was just talking about, where you want to, the habits that we build are very useful, but you've got to use them and you've got to learn things and then figure out how to transcend them. For me, I guess the thing that has always helped me the most is to focus on aspects of music making aside from just the mind. I feel like so much of the time, the way that we tend to learn the Western approach is to focus on the mind above all else. And for me, what I've found has been very helpful is to prioritize some of the other modes of working on music. Focus on the body and focus on the heart. And then when you wake those things up, the mind starts to find its proper place, and then you can start to use the things that you've learned. Now, my basic sort of philosophy of how I think about music, something that I've shared a number of times before, but I think is valuable to touch on here as well, which is that the basic way that I think about it is you've got three of the most fundamental parts of making music are rhythm, melody, and harmony, right? And each of those corresponds to one of the primary things of being human as well. I would say, rhythm to the body, melody to the heart, and then harmony to the mind. Now, that's an oversimplification, of course. And there's definitely, they all influence each other. There is no melody without rhythm, and there is no harmony without melody. It's an artificial distinction, but it's useful for me to break it down to these component parts and then be able to sort of wake them up one by one. And from there, be able to find the way to make something feel alive, right? So if you are trying to figure out how to break your habits, one of the important things that I've found is to simplify. Force yourself to, instead of being stuck at the piano and just allowing yourself to constantly find your hands back in the same positions all the time, and letting muscle memory do its thing. Instead of that, find ways to break that, and also at the same time make the rhythm start to feel good. Other things that can be very useful are to create restrictions for yourself while you're playing. So, for example, say we're playing over this same tune, which I hope that you guys can tell what it is. But I will not play the melody of it. And but this exercise may show you a little bit of what it is. So here's an exercise that many of you may have learned at some point. There's, where you're playing through the chords of a tune and you play the third degree of the chord on the downbeat, right? So that's something that many people have learned at one point or another. But it doesn't, and on its own, that kind of exercise isn't that exciting. If you treat it as something where you're like, okay, I'm just going to land on the third, land on the third, land on the third. However, if you try to take that restriction, just because you land on the third on the downbeat, that doesn't mean that that's where your line needs to end. So by disguising to a certain extent, I'm still playing the third on the downbeat, but I'm not making it as simplistic. I'm still finding ways to take this rule, but still try to make it feel like music. And then vice versa, you can, so in the same way that you were having destinations, you can also create notes that you avoid. So you're trying to make your way through a chord progression. See what happens if in your right hand lines, you don't allow yourself to play any thirds. It's hard, and I definitely, made a couple of mistakes where I played the third, but it forced me out of my usual habitual way of thinking. And so these are a few examples of those kinds of games that you can create for yourself as well. Those are just, some pretty simple ones.